Relationships are complex. It's impossible to put all relationships into one single basket. But the book I read that we're going to be talking about today, called Fair Play, tries to do that and tries to come up with some easy changes that can improve any relationship. So there's the book, and then there's also the cards that go along with it. This was a book that I saw recommended on TikTok, and I hadn't found anything that was interesting to read, so I decided to pick it up. And this is going to be my discussion on what I found helpful from this book and what I thought kind of didn't hit the mark, because for every self-help book out there, you have some great information, and then you have some corny stuff that doesn't work for a lot of people, and I'm going to kind of discuss my feelings on it. So I'm going to break up this video into three main parts. Part one, I'm going to talk about who can benefit from this book, because it's really frustrating when you go, purchase a book, spend your time reading a book, and then you get like halfway through it and you're like, this doesn't really help me. So I'm going to talk who it's for. Part two, I'm going to talk about some of the main points from this book that can improve any relationship. These aren't ones that are the main topics of the overall book, but they're ones that I think can apply to pretty much everyone. And then I'm going to wrap up the video talking about some criticisms that I have on the book and how it could be improved. Every time I read a book like this, there's always some things that I wish were done differently, and I wanted to discuss that, and then I'll finally give it a ranking at the end of the video. So part one, who's going to benefit from this book? And honestly, I think it's pretty much anyone that's in a relationship, especially someone that's living with a partner. These are topics focused on splitting up housework and the daily chores that go along with being in a relationship. And I think living with someone is one of the first times that you're going to really figure out how is this time and effort split between the couple. Because when you're living separately, sure, you have this like honeymoon phase where you only really need to be on your best behavior for some of the days, and then the rest of the time you can go back to living in your filth and not really have to worry about it. But I wanted to pick up this book to see if there's some ways that I can improve my relationship. I think I'm in an incredibly healthy relationship, but there's always ways to improve, and I always like seeing ways that other people have improved their situation, and you know what, I'll see if I can get anything out of it. But this book made me step back and kind of view how my partner will view some things that I view as inconsequential, and how over time when it builds up, you get a sense of resentment. And that first aha moment that I got out of this goes to part one of the main takeaways that I got from this book, is that it's not about being equal, it's about being fair. When I think about being in a relationship, one of the first things that comes up is being equal. You are equal partners in a relationship, that makes sense. But when it comes to something like this, when it's splitting up housework, you don't need it to be equal, you just need it to be fair. The author mentions an interaction that she had with her partner that really stuck out to me, because it's something that on the surface, it doesn't seem like a lot, but if you've been resentful and feeling that way for a long time, I could see how it would push you over the edge. Basically, the author gets a text from her husband in the morning saying that some drunk person left their jacket and a beer can out on the lawn. And they kind of chuckle about that, being like, oh, they must have had a crazy night. But then she gets home after a long day of work, and not only having to take care of the kids when she gets home, she sees that the jacket and the bottle are still out there. This is kind of the feeling of resentment that builds up over a long time, where she views this as her partner not valuing her time. It's not worth his time to pick it up. Her time is worth less, so she is the one that's going to have to pick it up. And that's something that really stuck out to me. This is something that could have been fixed within 1 minute worth of effort, but it's about being fair. It's not about being equal. This is about the husband not valuing the time that the wife has as much as his own, and as a result, lets it slip through the cracks and doesn't actually fix this problem that could be solved relatively easily. The number two concept that I learned in this book that I think can improve any relationship is the way of conceiving a plan, planning it, and then executing it. They call it CPE in the book, and it's the way of delegating tasks, but making sure that the same person that is responsible for it is the one that follows through on everything. This is so you avoid things falling through the cracks. You have conceived the plan. You have, what are we going to do? Make the decision, plan it, how are you going to get it done, and then execute when and where are you going to execute the plan. One of the examples I thought of has to do with planning dinners. We are planning dinners for a week, and for times that it's my responsibility, it's beneficial for me to come up with what we're going to eat, with some feedback from the partner, of course. Make sure that we're on the same page on that, plan when and where we're going to pick up the food and when we're going to go grocery shopping, and then make sure that I am involved with executing the plan. This is so that you avoid things falling through the cracks. There are always times where you can do 90% of it, but maybe you ask for some help on something that, you don't really need to. The author argues that for someone to delegate part of a task, it's not beneficial for the long term. You might as well conceive, plan, and execute, and that's the CPE of this book. The third topic from this book that I thought was really important comes with the minimum standard of care. When you're delegating a task, what you may consider being a completed task, your partner may not agree with. Let's talk about an example of doing dishes. For some person, it might be You know, once the dishes are starting to overflow, you do them. In your mind, you're completing the task to the minimum standard of care, but maybe your partner wants them to be completely cleaned by the time you go to bed at the end of the night. If that hasn't been communicated, you're going to result in a situation where you feel like you're getting the work done and doing a good job, but your partner is feeling like you're dropping the ball. And until you've had this communication on what is the minimum standard of care, you may not be on the same page when it comes to what you're expecting for some of these responsibilities. So sitting down and making sure that you're discussing the minimum standard of care for some of these seemingly simple tasks, I think is a great way to avoid resentment in a relationship, and it's not something that I had thought about in the past. Anytime you consume some sort of media, there's always going to be some criticisms that you have, and I wanted to discuss the two main ones that I had with this book. The first one is the most obvious, is that it's incredibly heteronormative. Most of the examples that are talked about in this book is a situation where you have a woman who is the primary caretaker of the kids that is overwhelmed by all the responsibilities with her husband that's not doing their fair share. This could easily be changed to be very gender neutral. Sure, you have some of the emotional response of, women out there that are seeing situations similar to theirs and some of the benefits that would have to the reader, but it doesn't include everyone. I think it very easily could have been changed to talk about situations that everyone could relate to. Yes, you have situations where women, on average, are spending more time at home with the kids than the husbands, but that's not every relationship, and I thought it was important to discuss that. While it's good for the book and it makes some good stories and easy to relate to for someone that's in a similar situation, it could easily be changed to be very gender neutral and still have the same topics be getting across. And then the other discussion that I wanted to have on a criticism is that it makes having kids sound absolutely awful. If you read the book, it reads like, oh yeah, my life was fantastic. I had a wonderful marriage. I had a great career. But then everything changed when I had kids. It ruined my life. I have no spark in my relationship anymore. And I am a shell of the person that I was when I first started. I don't know why that would be something that sounds enjoyable. I am someone that admittedly does not plan on having kids ever, but hearing that made me very confident in my decision. And so I thought it was very interesting to hear those stories. And while it's not, anything that the author did wrong, I thought it was weird for all these examples of people talking about how their lives were changed for the worse from having kids, and then try to promote you to work harder on fixing your at-home relationships when all these people are talking about how horrible their lives are. Just thought it was an interesting decision. So overall, I'd probably give this book like a 4 out of 5. I thought it was pretty beneficial. I went into it with kind of an open mind. I'd seen it on TikTok discussed as something that people longer into a relationship could read and get something out of, and that's why I decided to read it. And there wasn't anything specific that I was trying to improve in my relationship, but I learned some good things from it. I think that communication on the minimum standard of care was one of the biggest takeaways that I had from this, that while you may think that you're doing something to the level that you care about, your partner may not feel the same way, and until you have that discussion, you might not be on the same page. So overall, highly recommend going and reading this book. This is probably the first paperback book I've read in probably a year, and it felt really good. It was something that I read before bed, and it made me pretty motivated to try to improve the small parts of my relationship that maybe I had not been thinking about as actively. So overall, pretty good book. Let me know if you've read it in the comments down below, and let me know if you've got the cards. It's something that I'm going to try out with my partner in the upcoming weeks, and I'll probably make that into a separate video. But this is my discussion on fair play, the idea of not trying to be equal, but be fair. And let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.